Miami Beach 2022, but somebody's trying to drag us back to 1984. You know what they say about Miami? The heat makes people crazy. The humidity rots everything from the inside out. And the neon lights? They hide more than they reveal. I'm Detective Rico Vega, Miami-Dade PD, and I'm about to tell you about the case that made me understand why some decades should stay buried. If you're watching this from South Beach right now, maybe look over your shoulder. Check who's wearing what. Because the killer I tracked, they had a thing for authenticity. Pastel suits, Ray-Bans at night, and that specific shade of pink that only existed in the 80s. Drop a comment. What year do you think Miami peaked? 84? 86? Trust me, after you hear this story, you'll be glad those years are gone. Some of you might remember Miami Vice, Scarface, the glory days of South Beach. But there was something else happening in those years, something the tourist board doesn't want you to know about. Subscribe if you want to hear how vintage fashion became a death sentence in modern Miami. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in October. October in Miami is still hell's front porch, 90 degrees at midnight. Humidity that makes breathing feel like drowning in slow motion. I was working night shift out of the Miami Beach station, had been for 3 years since making detective. The night shift in Miami Beach isn't like other places. You're dealing with drunk tourists, club fights, the occasional drug deal gone wrong, and every once in a while something that makes you question reality. Vega, we got a body on the beach, Lieutenant Diana Morales said over the phone. She'd been my commanding officer for 2 years, tough as nails, seen everything Miami could throw at a cop. But there was something in her voice that night that made me sit up straight. Ocean Drive near 14th Street, Enrico. It's weird. Weird how? I asked, already grabbing my keys. Just get down here and prepare yourself. This isn't like anything we've seen before. The drive from the station to Ocean Drive should have taken 10 minutes. I made it in 5, speeding through empty streets lit by neon signs that hadn't changed since the 1980s. The Art Deco hotels lined up like pastel tombstones, their restored facades hiding modern interiors, the perfect metaphor for Miami Beach. Everything's about the surface, about maintaining the illusion. The crime scene was already taped off when I arrived. Uniforms keeping back the few late-night joggers and early morning drunks who'd stumbled onto something they wished they hadn't. The forensics team was setting up their lights, turning the beach into a stage, which seemed appropriate given what I was about to see. The body was positioned perfectly on the sand, laid out like someone had arranged it for a photo shoot. Male, mid-30s, Hispanic. But it was what he was wearing that made everyone stop and stare. Full Miami Vice costume. White Armani suit, or a perfect replica. Pastel pink t-shirt, white leather loafers with no socks. His hair was styled with enough gel to survive a hurricane. That specific 80s look where every strand was deliberately placed. Even had a gold Rolex, or what looked like one, on his wrist. But the worst part was his face. Someone had applied makeup to make him look like he'd been dead since 1985. The skin was painted with this waxy, deteriorated look, but underneath, the forensics team assured me, he'd only been dead for maybe 6 hours. The killer had spent time, significant time, making a fresh corpse look like it had been moldering for 37 years. Jesus Christ, I muttered, crouching beside the body. Who are you supposed to be? That's the thing, Morales said, appearing beside me. We ran his prints already. Quick match. His name is Carlos Mendez, age 34. Worked as a bartender at one of the clubs on Washington. But detective, look at this. She handed me an evidence bag containing a driver's license. But it wasn't modern. It was a Florida license from 1985, with Carlos's photo but the name Raymond Cruz, and a birth date that would make him 58 years old today. The license looked authentic, aged naturally, not like something printed yesterday and artificially weathered. This is impossible, I said. Carlos would have been, what, -3 years old in 1985? Keep looking, Morales said, handing me another evidence bag. This one contained a photograph, also from the 80s, based on the quality and color saturation. It showed a group of men standing in front of what looked like the Fontainebleau Hotel. One of them looked exactly like Carlos Mendez. Same face, same distinctive scar above his left eyebrow. But the photo was genuine vintage, not some modern recreation. I could tell from the paper, the way the colors had faded in that specific way old photos do. There's more, said Dr. Elena Chen, the medical examiner, walking up with her tablet. The cause of death is unusual. He was killed by a single stab wound to the heart, but the weapon appears to have been a blade made of compressed cocaine. I'm sorry, what? Compressed cocaine, formed into a knife-like shape. It would have to be incredibly pure and treated with some kind of binding agent to hold that shape and hardness. After stabbing him, the weapon was left to dissolve in his bloodstream. He would have died from the wound, but his system shows massive cocaine toxicity as well. It's like someone weaponized the drug itself. That's very 1980s Miami, I said, the understatement of the century. There's one more thing, Dr. Chen continued, pulling up photos on her tablet. These were carved into his back, post-mortem. The images showed numbers carved into the victim's skin. 1-5. 1 of 5, I said. This is just the beginning. I spent the rest of that night and the following day diving into Carlos Mendez's life. He was a transplant from New York, had been in Miami for 5 years, worked at a club called Retro Wave that specialized in 80s music and aesthetic. His co-workers described him as obsessed with the era, collected vintage Miami Vice memorabilia, even had his apartment decorated to look like something from 1985. But here's where it got strange, and in Miami, it takes a lot to qualify as strange. Multiple people, independently, mentioned that Carlos had recently been talking about remembering things that hadn't happened yet, and living someone else's memories. His ex-girlfriend, Maria, told me he'd started having nightmares about dying in 1985, about being someone named Raymond Cruz. He showed me this photo, Maria said, pulling up her phone. Said he found it at an estate sale, but that it was him in the picture. I thought he was having some kind of breakdown. It was the same photo we'd found on his body. I ran the name Raymond Cruz through our databases and hit pay dirt. Raymond Cruz, small-time dealer, found dead on Miami Beach October 15, 1985. Single stab wound to the heart. Case never solved. The crime scene photos were grainy, black and white, but the positioning was identical to how we'd found Carlos. Same spot on the beach, same body position, same everything except for one detail. Raymond Cruz had been wearing normal 1985 clothing, not dressed up like a Miami Vice extra. Someone's recreating an old murder, I told Morales. But they're enhancing it, making it more 1980s than the actual 1980s was. Why? She asked. Before I could answer, we got another call. Another body. This one was found at the Versace mansion, which seemed ironically appropriate. Female, late 20s, dressed like she'd stepped out of a Nagel painting. Geometric makeup, shoulder pads that could take out someone's eye, enough hairspray to put another hole in the ozone layer. The victim was Jennifer Huang, a social media influencer who specialized in retrowave aesthetics. She'd been killed with a weapon made of compressed cocaine, just like Carlos, and carved into her back. 2-5. But Jennifer also had a connection to 1985. Among her possessions was a birth certificate for Angela Wong, born 1960, died October 16, 1985. The photo on Angela Wong's old driver's license, found in Jennifer's purse, looked exactly like Jennifer. Angela Wong had been found dead near the Fontainebleau Hotel in 1985, the day after Raymond Cruz, also stabbed, also unsolved. Two modern victims, recreating two murders from 1985, but dressed like Hollywood's version of the 80s rather than the real thing. I pulled the files on all unsolved murders from October 1985 in Miami Beach. There were 5 that fit the pattern. All killed within a week, all stabbed, all found in different iconic locations around the beach. We need to find the other 3 potential victims, I told Morales. Whatever's happening here, someone's trying to complete a pattern that started 37 years ago. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over the evidence, trying to make sense of it. The cocaine weapons were particularly bothering me. In the 1980s, cocaine was everywhere in Miami, but using it as a murder weapon? That was theatrical, symbolic, like someone was trying to make a point about the era itself. I decided to visit the scenes of the original 1985 murders. Started with the spot where Raymond Cruz had died. It was near a lifeguard station that had been rebuilt several times since the 80s, but the beach itself was the same. As I stood there at 3 a.m., the same time Cruz had been killed, I noticed something. There was a pattern in the sand, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Symbols drawn with something that made the sand glow faintly under the moonlight. They looked old, like hieroglyphs or something, but also modern, incorporating what looked like chemical formulas. I took photos, made notes of the exact positioning. The second site, where Angela Wong had died, had the same symbols, painted in what looked like UV reactive paint on a wall that had probably been repainted dozens of times since 1985. But under black light, they were there, layered beneath decades of paint. I was documenting the third site when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Detective Vega," a voice said, and it sounded wrong, like it was coming through a filter that made it sound older, grainier, like a phone call from the 1980s. "You're looking in the right places, but for the wrong reasons." "Who is this?" "Someone who was there the first time. Someone who's been waiting 37 years for the pattern to repeat." Miami Beach isn't just a place, Detective. It's a temporal anomaly. Every so often, the past and present bleed together. 1985 is trying to happen again. That's insane. Is it? You've seen the evidence. People who look exactly like people who died decades ago. Weapons that shouldn't exist. Photos that can't be real. Miami Beach is special, Detective. The cocaine, the violence, the excess of the 1980s. It left a mark, a wound in time, and some wounds, they reopen. The line went dead. I tried calling back, but the number didn't exist. The next morning, victim number 3 was found. Marcus Rodriguez, a DJ at a South Beach club, discovered on the roof of the Delano Hotel. Full 80s regalia, but even more exaggerated. A suit that seemed to glow with its own neon light. Sunglasses at night, of course, and enough gold chains to stock a jewelry store. The cocaine blade had been left partially dissolved in his chest, and his back read 3-5. Marcus had been obsessed with someone named Diego Moreno, had even legally changed his name to match before changing it back. Diego Moreno, killed October 17, 1985, on the roof of what was then the St. Moritz Hotel, same location as the Delano now stands. We were running out of time. October 18th was tomorrow, and if the pattern held, victim 4 would die then. The original victim from 1985 was Patricia Nash, killed at what was then the Warsaw Ballroom, now a CVS pharmacy on Collins Avenue. But who was the modern version? Who was walking around Miami Beach right now, possibly having dreams about being someone who died in 1985? I had uniforms canvass every vintage clothing store, every 80s-themed club, every social media influencer who specialized in retro wave content. We found her just in time. Sarah Patterson, fashion blogger, who'd been posting increasingly strange content about remembering the music and the neon calling me home. She'd bought a ticket to an 80s night at a club on Collins Avenue, right where the Warsaw Ballroom used to be. We took her into protective custody, despite her protests that she had to go to the club, that Patricia was waiting for her. She showed us photos she'd found at garage sales, estate sales, thrift stores, all showing Patricia Nash, who looked exactly like her. "It's not possible," Sarah kept saying. "But I remember dying. I remember the knife, the cold, the music stopping." That night, we staked out the old Warsaw Ballroom location. If the killer was going to complete their pattern, they'd have to come for Sarah, and we'd moved her to a safe house. But I stayed at the location, waiting, watching. At midnight, nothing. By 1 a.m., I was starting to think we'd successfully broken the pattern. Then at 2:15 a.m., I saw something that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. A figure walked past the CVS, dressed in full 1980s regalia. White suit, pink shirt, the works. But as they passed under each streetlight, they flickered. Not like a person walking through light and shadow, but like a TV with bad reception. Like they were struggling to maintain their presence in this time. I followed, keeping my distance, one hand on my service weapon, though I had no idea if bullets would work on whatever I was seeing. The figure led me down Collins Avenue toward the beach. Other people passed by, late-night partiers, drunk tourists, but none of them seemed to see the flickering person. It was like they existed on a different frequency, one that only I was tuned into. Maybe because I'd been so deep in the case, maybe because I'd stood in those ritual sites, breathed in whatever residue they'd left behind. The figure stopped at the beach, the exact spot where Carlos Mendez had been found, where Raymond Cruz had died in 1985. They turned to face me, and I saw their face clearly for the first time. It was impossible. It was Carlos Mendez, but also not. The features kept shifting between Carlos and someone else, someone older, like two photographs superimposed on each other. "Detective Vega," they said, and their voice had that same filtered quality as the phone call. "You're trying to stop something that's already happened. That's happening. That will happen." "Carlos? Is that you?" "I'm Carlos. I'm Raymond. I'm both. I'm neither." The figure flickered more intensely. "Don't you understand? 1985 never ended in Miami Beach. It just kept looping, hiding under the surface, waiting for the right conditions to resurface." "Who killed you?" "I did. They did. We all did. The killer isn't a person, Detective. It's an idea. It's the spirit of 1985 Miami Beach, all the cocaine and violence and excess compressed into a form that can manifest physically. Every generation that falls in love with that era, that tries to recreate it, they feed it, make it stronger." "That's insane." "Is it? You've seen the evidence. The cocaine blades. Literal weaponized nostalgia for Miami's drug-fueled past. The perfect 80s styling. The era consuming those who worship it. The identical faces across decades. Time folding in on itself." The figure started to fade, becoming more translucent with each word. "The fifth victim. It's not who you think. The pattern isn't complete with 5. It needs 6. The 6th was never found in 1985 because the 6th is the one who breaks the loop, or continues it. Who's the 6th? But they were gone, leaving only a faint outline in the sand that the wind quickly erased. I rushed back to the safe house where we were keeping Sarah Patterson. She was still there, safe, but she was drawing. Sheets and sheets of paper covered in those same symbols I'd found at the murder sites. But she was adding to them, creating new patterns, new connections. "I can't stop," she said, not looking up from her frantic sketching. "Patricia is in my head. She's showing me things, the truth about 1985. "What truth?" "There was a cult. Not like you're thinking. Not robes and candles. A cult of personality, of lifestyle. They worshipped the excess. the power that came from cocaine and money. They performed a ritual, tried to capture the essence of that year, that moment when Miami Beach was the center of the universe. But something went wrong. The ritual worked too well. It created a temporal loop, a pocket of 1985 that exists parallel to our time. She showed me one of her drawings. It was a map of Miami Beach, but overlaid with another map, the same area but from 1985. Certain points lined up, the murder sites. They were anchor points, places where the two timelines touched. Every so often, when the conditions are right, the same dates, similar people, the same obsession with that era, the loop tries to complete itself. It needs 6 deaths to fully manifest, to bring 1985 into the present permanently, or to drag the present back to 1985. I'm not sure which anymore. Who's the 6th victim? Sarah looked at me with eyes that weren't quite her own anymore. The 6th isn't a victim. The 6th is the catalyst, the one who chooses whether the loop closes or breaks. My phone rang. Morales. Rico, we've got another body, but you need to see this. The 4th victim was found at Bayfront Park, displayed on a bench facing the water. But this one was different. It wasn't someone dressed like the 80s. It was someone dressed like they were from 2022 trying to dress like the 80s. Intentionally wrong. Intentionally anachronistic. Modern sneakers with a vintage suit. An Apple Watch next to gold chains. Current hairstyle with 80s sunglasses. The victim was Tommy Chen, a true crime podcaster who'd been investigating the killings. The same case I was working. He'd gotten too close to something. But what disturbed me more was what was carved into his back. 4-5. Wrong timeline. Wrong timeline? Morales asked. What does that mean? I thought about the flickering figure, about Sarah's drawings, about loops and parallel times. I think someone's trying to send us a message. This victim wasn't part of the original pattern. Someone killed him to warn us. Warn us about what? Before I could answer, every phone in the vicinity started playing the same song. In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. Not from any app or streaming service, just playing through the speakers like the phones themselves had been hijacked. The drum solo hit, that iconic moment. And then everything went dark. Every light in a 3-block radius went out simultaneously. When the lights came back on 30 seconds later, there was another body right next to Tommy Chen. This one was dressed perfectly in authentic 1985 clothing, down to the smallest detail. It was David Martinez, a Miami Beach historian who specialized in the 1980s era. He'd been helping us with the case, providing context about the original murders. The carving on his back read, 5-5, correct timeline. 2 4th victims, 2 timelines. The loop was breaking down or maybe breaking through. That's when I realized the truth. There weren't 5 victims in 1985. There were 6. The 6th had never been found because the 6th wasn't killed in 1985. The 6th was killed in 2022 but appeared in 1985. Time wasn't linear in this case. It was circular. I ran back to the station and pulled up the cold case files from 1985 again. This time, I looked at what happened after October 18th. October 19th, 1985. An unidentified body was found on Miami Beach. No ID, no missing person report that matched, wearing clothes that witnesses described as weird, like from a movie or something. The case had been buried, forgotten, because it didn't fit any patterns. I looked at the crime scene photos, enhanced them with modern software. The face became clearer. It was me. I was the 6th victim, killed in 2022 but found in 1985. That's impossible, I said out loud. But even as I said it, I knew it was true. I could feel it, a pull toward something, like destiny or gravity or inevitability. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, detective," the voice said. But this time it wasn't filtered. It was clear, modern, present. "You understand now, don't you? The loop needs to complete. You're the sixth. You've always been the sixth." "Who are you?" "I'm you, Rico. I'm the you from the loop that succeeded. I killed those 5 people in 1985, and you killed the 5 in 2022. We're the same person, just from different iterations of the timeline. Every loop, a version of us tries to break free, tries to stop it from happening, and every loop, we fail because we're part of the pattern. I haven't killed anyone. Haven't you? Think about it. Where were you when each murder happened? Really think. Check your apartment. Check your closet." I drove home, my hands shaking. I lived in a converted Art Deco building on Ocean Drive, had chosen it specifically for its history, its connection to old Miami Beach. I'd told myself it was for the aesthetic, for the culture, but maybe it was something else. Maybe I'd been drawn here. In my closet, behind clothes I didn't remember buying, I found them. 5 suits, each perfectly styled for the 1980s, each with traces of blood, each with a dissolved cocaine blade in the pocket, and a journal in my handwriting documenting the murders, planning them, executing them. But I didn't remember any of it. "The loop creates multiple versions of us," the voice on the phone continued. When had I answered it again? One who investigates, one who kills, both existing simultaneously until the loop completes. You're the detective in this iteration, but you're also the killer. You just experience time differently. How do I stop it? You can't. You can only choose how it ends. Either you complete the pattern, become the 6th victim, and the loop resets for another 37 years. Or you refuse, and the timeline collapses, merging 1985 and 2022 permanently. Either way, Miami Beach, as you know it, ceases to exist. I looked at the clothes, the evidence of crimes I didn't remember committing. Then I looked at my hands. Under the right light, at the right angle, they flickered, just like the figure I'd seen on the beach. I was already partially unstuck in time, existing in multiple timelines at once. I drove to the beach, to the spot where it all started. Sarah Patterson was there, but also Patricia Nash, the same person in 2 times. Carlos was there too, and Raymond, and all the others. All existing simultaneously, the past and present occupying the same space. "Make your choice, detective," they said in unison. "Complete the loop or break it, but choose quickly. The sun rises in an hour, and October 19th begins. One way or another, this ends today." I stood there on the beach, feeling the pull of multiple timelines, multiple versions of myself. The detective who wanted to save everyone, the killer who wanted to preserve the loop, the person who just wanted to understand what was happening. All me, all real. The cocaine blade materialized in my hand without my conscious thought. It was beautiful in a horrible way, crystalline and pure, the essence of 1980s Miami compressed into a weapon. I could complete the pattern, kill myself, send my body back to 1985 to be found as John Doe. The loop would reset, and in 37 years, another version of me would investigate these same murders. Or I could refuse, break the blade, break the pattern, and let the timelines collapse into each other. Miami Beach would become a temporal anomaly, a place where past and present existed simultaneously. The consequences were unknowable. I thought about the victims: Carlos, Jennifer, Marcus, Tommy, David, all dead because they'd been drawn to an era that had become literally toxic, manifesting as physical violence. The 1980s hadn't just left a cultural mark on Miami Beach, it had left a wound in time itself. "Choose," the voices insisted. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that looked exactly the same as they had in 1985. I stood on the beach with the cocaine blade in my hand, watching the sun rise over Biscayne Bay. The others, the victims, the echoes, whatever they were, formed a circle around me. Each of them flickered between their 2022 and 1985 selves, like a TV channel that couldn't quite tune in properly. 5 minutes, Detective, Sarah Patricia said. In 5 minutes, the timelines either merge or separate forever. I needed to understand more before I made a choice that would affect not just me, but the entire city. Tell me about the original ritual, the one in 1985. The figures looked at each other, their faces shifting between young and old, alive and dead. Finally, Carlos Raymond spoke. There was a man, called himself the Architect. He wasn't from Miami, but he understood what Miami represented in 1985. The apex of excess, the perfect fusion of beauty and violence, paradise and hell. Jennifer Wash Angela continued. He gathered followers, people who embodied different aspects of that era. The dealer, the model, the club owner, the socialite, the cop. The cop? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Detective Rico Vega, Miami-Dade PD, 1985. Marcus San Diego said. You were new to the force, young, ambitious. The Architect showed you things, truths about how Miami really worked. The cocaine trade wasn't just crime, it was the economy. The violence wasn't just disorder, it was the natural state. That's not me. I wasn't even born until 1987. Time isn't linear here, Tommy's voice said, but his 1985 counterpart had no form. He really was an anomaly, wrong timeline, as his carving had said. You were born in 1987, but you also died in 1985. You're investigating murders in 2022 that you committed, that you will commit, that you have always been committing. My head hurt trying to follow the logic, but on some level, it made sense. I'd always felt drawn to the 1980s, always felt like I'd missed my era. My apartment was decorated in Art Deco style. I collected Miami Vice memorabilia. I'd chosen to work Miami Beach specifically because of its history, maybe because I was part of that history. The Architect, I said. Who was he? Where is he now? The figures all pointed at once, at me. No, I said, but even as I denied it, memories started surfacing. Not my memories, but also mine, planning the ritual, selecting the victims, creating the cocaine blades using chemistry that shouldn't have been possible with 1985 technology, but was because time meant nothing in the loop. I remembered standing on this same beach in 1985, wearing a white suit that would become the uniform of an era, holding the same crystalline blade, making the same choice. Complete the loop or break it. And I'd chosen to complete it, to preserve the perfect moment of Miami Beach forever, trapped in amber made of cocaine and neon. Every 37 years, I said, understanding flooding through me. The loop resets. A new version of me, of all of us, plays out the same pattern. How many times has this happened? This is the third iteration, Sarah Patricia said. 1985 was the first. 1948 before that, though it was different then. Art Deco and mobsters instead of cocaine and excess. 2022 is supposed to be the third, but something's different this time. What's different? You're aware. You're not supposed to be aware. You're supposed to play your role, investigate the murders without realizing you're committing them, then die as the sixth victim to complete the pattern. But somehow, this time, you woke up. I thought about what had changed. The internet, social media, the true crime podcasts. Information moved differently now. The past couldn't stay buried the way it once did. Tommy Chen's podcast had been investigating the 1985 murders. had found connections that should have stayed hidden. His research had created a crack in the loop, allowing me to see through it. "That's why Tommy had to die," I said. "He was breaking the pattern, but killing him wrong broke it more," David Martinez said, his historian knowledge evident even in death. 2 fourth victims created a paradox. The timeline is unstable now. That's why you have this choice. Previous versions of you didn't. The loop just completed automatically. The cocaine blade in my hand was starting to melt from the heat of my palm, or maybe from the increasing instability of the timeline. Drops of liquefied drug fell onto the sand, immediately crystallizing into those same symbols I'd been seeing everywhere. "If I complete the loop," I asked, "what happens?" "Everything resets. The murders are undone, but they'll happen again in 37 years. 2059. Another version of us will play out the same pattern. Miami Beach continues as it is, a place where past and present coexist but don't merge. And if I break it? Unknown. Maybe the timelines collapse into each other permanently. Maybe Miami Beach becomes unstuck in time, existing in all eras simultaneously. Maybe we all cease to exist, or exist forever, or both." I looked at the sunrise, perfect and pink and exactly like every Miami Beach postcard ever made. The city was waking up. Early morning joggers were starting to appear on the boardwalk. A few were already stopping, pointing at our group, though I wondered what they were actually seeing. Crime scene tape? Empty beach? Or the truth? A group of people who existed in multiple times at once? Lieutenant Morales arrived, but when she got out of her car, she was wearing a 1985 police uniform. Then she flickered, and it was 2022 again. The timelines were already starting to bleed together. "Rico!" she called out, but her voice echoed, like multiple versions of her were speaking at once. "What's happening? The whole city is changing." I looked back toward Ocean Drive. The Art Deco hotels were shifting, some looking newly built, some abandoned, some renovated, all simultaneously. Cars from different eras occupied the same parking spaces. People walked by in fashion from across the decades, some solid, some translucent, some flickering between states. "The loop is breaking down," I said. "Even if I complete it now, I don't think it can reset properly. We've damaged it too much. So, what do we do?" I looked at the cocaine blade, at the victims surrounding me, at the city I'd sworn to protect shifting between timelines behind us. There was a third option, one that hadn't existed in previous loops because the pattern had never been this damaged before. "We changed the pattern," I said. "Instead of 6 deaths, we have 6 survivors. We all refuse our roles." "That's not possible," Carlos Raymond said. "We're already dead." "Are you? Or are you dead in one timeline and alive in another? If time isn't linear here, if past and present can coexist, then so can life and death." I threw the cocaine blade into the ocean. It dissolved instantly, turning the waves briefly crystalline before dispersing. The moment it was gone, I felt something shift. The memories of the other timeline, the one where I was the killer, started to fade. Not disappear, but become less real, like remembering a vivid dream. "Choose," I said to the others. "Choose to live. Choose your timeline." One by one, they made their choice. Carlos chose 2022, letting Raymond fade into history. Jennifer chose to be both Angela and herself, existing in a quantum state between times. Marcus chose 1985, deciding he belonged in the past more than the present. Sarah chose to be Patricia, to live the life that had been cut short. As each chose, they solidified, became real again. Not alive in the traditional sense. They had still died, but not gone either. Miami Beach had always been a city of ghosts, of eras layered on top of each other. Now it was literally true. The sun finished rising, and October 19th began. But it was October 19th, 2022, and October 19th, 1985, and October 19th of every year in between, all at once. Miami Beach had become unstuck in time, but instead of chaos, there was a strange harmony. The city had always been about reinvention, about multiple identities, about the past and future colliding. Now it was all of that, literally. Morales stood next to me, solid and real and from 2022. So what do we tell the department? The truth, I said, that Miami Beach is what it's always been, a place where different times coexist. We just can see it clearly now. They'll think we're insane. Maybe. Or maybe everyone already knows on some level. Why do you think people come to Miami Beach? It's not just the beaches or the clubs. It's the feeling that you can step into a different era, be a different person. That feeling was always real. We just didn't realize how real. I looked at my hands. They were solid, no flickering. I was anchored in 2022, but I could feel the other timelines, like radio stations I could tune into if I wanted. The killer version of me was still there, in 1985, but he was just an echo now, a possibility that didn't have to become reality. We spent the next weeks trying to manage the temporal anomaly that Miami Beach had become. The FBI sent specialists in unusual phenomena. Apparently, this wasn't the first time a city had become unstuck in time, just the most public. They set up monitoring stations, created guidelines for dealing with temporal residents, people like our victims who existed between times. The city adapted surprisingly quickly. Miami Beach had always been surreal, a place where the impossible seemed possible. Now it literally was. Tourists came to see the ghost of Ocean Drive, figures from different eras walking the same streets. The Art Deco hotels advertised authentic 1980s experiences that were actually authentic, staffed by people who existed partially in that era. But there were dangers, too. Some people got lost between times, unable to find their way back to their proper era. Others tried to exploit the temporal instability for crime, committing murders in one timeline to affect another. That's where I came in. I became Miami Beach's first temporal detective, investigating crimes that happened across multiple timelines. The beach bodies case had been just the beginning. The city needed someone who understood the new reality, who could navigate between times, who could solve murders that happened yesterday but also 30 years ago. The cocaine blade never returned, but new weapons appeared. Artifacts from different eras weaponized by those who understood the city's new nature. A Tommy gun from the 1920s that fired bullets into the future. A smartphone from 2022 that could hack computers in 1985. The temporal arms race had begun. 3 months after the loop broke, I stood on the same spot where Carlos Mendez had died, where Raymond Cruz had died, where the pattern had started and ended. The beach looked normal during the day, but I could see the layers if I concentrated. Every era of Miami Beach existing at once. The Seminole fishing camps, the 1920s paradise, the Art Deco glory, the 1980s excess, the modern renovation, and glimpses of futures yet to come. Sarah Patricia approached me. She'd chosen to live primarily in 1985, but visited 2022 regularly. "Any regrets?" she asked. "About breaking the loop? About choosing to be the detective instead of the architect?" I thought about it. In another timeline, I'd created all of this. I'd been the architect, the one who'd tried to preserve Miami Beach's perfect moment in temporal amber. But that version of me had been wrong. Cities, like people, weren't meant to be preserved. They were meant to change, to grow, to become something new while carrying their history with them. "No regrets," I said. Miami Beach was never about staying the same. It was always about reinvention. Now it can be all of its reinventions at once. And the next loop? 2059? There won't be one. The pattern is broken. Time moves forward here now, just in all directions at once. She smiled, an expression that belonged to both 1985 and 2022. Good. Once was enough. Twice was too much. 3 times would have been insane. This whole city is insane, I said. Always has been. Now it's just honest about it. 6 months after the temporal convergence, Miami Beach had become the most studied city in the world. Physicists, historians, and tourists flocked to see the place where time had broken. The CDC had to create new categories for cause of death. Temporal displacement, chronological conflict, past-present interface syndrome. The real estate market went insane. You could buy a condo that existed in 3 different decades simultaneously, each with different views and amenities. I'd set up my office in the old Miami Beach police station, the one from 1937 that now coexisted with the modern building. Depending on which door you used, you'd enter in different eras. My desk was from 2022, my chair from 1985, and my coffee maker from 1952, the best year for coffee makers, as it turned out. The morning of April 15th, 2023, and 1986 and 1949, depending on your perspective, Lieutenant Morales walked in with a case that would test everything I'd learned about temporal crime. "We've got a problem, Rico," she said, and I noticed she was wearing 3 different badges, one for each era she was currently serving in. "Someone's been murdered in 1987, but they're not supposed to die until 2024. "Temporal homicide," I said, already reaching for my jacket. "Who's the victim?" "That's the complicated part. It's you." I stopped mid-reach. "I'm sorry, what?" She handed me a file that felt warm to the touch, the way temporal evidence always did. Inside was a crime scene photo from January 3rd, 1987. A body on the beach, clearly murdered, face visible despite the decomposition. It was me, but older, maybe mid-60s. The me that should exist in 2024. "How is this possible?" I asked. "I'm here. I'm alive." "You're alive in 2023, but someone killed your 2024 self and dumped the body in 1987. It's a temporal assassination. Kill someone in the past before they're supposed to die in the future." This was new. We'd dealt with cross-timeline crimes before, but nothing this targeted, this specific. Someone had figured out how to use Miami Beach's temporal instability as a weapon. I studied the crime scene photos. The body, my body, had been found near the Fontainebleau, dressed in clothes that screamed 2024 fashion trying to blend into 1987. There were marks on the neck suggesting strangulation, but also burn patterns consistent with temporal displacement trauma, the kind of injuries you get from being forced through time. "Any witnesses?" "Several, but they're all in different timelines. A jogger from 1987 saw the body being dumped by someone in a hazmat suit. A tourist from 2001 saw a struggle on the beach that hasn't happened yet. A kid from 1962 drew a picture of the scary man fighting himself 3 days before it happened." I rubbed my temples, feeling the headache that came with temporal investigations. "Okay, let's think about this logically. Who would want to kill me in 2024? Someone you're going to arrest? Someone you're going to expose? This city's full of people with interests in different timelines now." She was right. Since the convergence, Miami Beach had attracted a new kind of criminal. Temporal smugglers who brought cocaine from the 1980s to sell in 2023 at collector prices. Chronological hitmen who could kill you before you were born. Timeline manipulators who changed the past to affect real estate prices in the present. We started at the 1987 crime scene, which was somehow still fresh despite being technically 36 years old. The beach there existed in a quantum state. Sometimes it was 1987, sometimes 2023, sometimes both. I could see my own body when I concentrated on the past, lying there in temporal rigor mortis. "This is really messing with my head," I told Morales. "Try not to think about it too hard. Temporal paradoxes can cause aneurysms." As we investigated, I noticed something odd about the burn patterns on the body. They weren't random. They formed symbols, similar to the ones from the original Beachbodies case, but evolved, more complex. Someone had turned my future corpse into a message. Dr. Chen, who now ran a temporal forensics lab that existed in 6 different years simultaneously, analyzed the symbols. "These are coordinates," she said, her 2023 self consulting with her 1995 self over equipment that wouldn't be invented for another decade. "Temporal coordinates. They point to a specific moment and place." The coordinates led to the Delano Hotel, December 31st, 1999. New Year's Eve at the turn of the millennium. A moment of massive temporal significance when everyone was thinking about time, about the future, about change. "That's in the past," Morales pointed out, "even for 1987. "Time isn't linear here anymore," I reminded her. "We can get there." Traveling to a specific point in Miami Beach's tangled timeline required concentration and the right entry points. We used the service elevator in the Delano. It had become a temporal conduit, each floor leading to a different year. "Press B for basement, get 1945. Press 23, get 2015. Press 20 while holding the close door button and thinking about Prince, get 1999. The elevator doors opened onto the Delano's Millennium Party. The place was packed with people celebrating the new century, champagne flowing, the future feeling bright and full of possibility. Nobody noticed us appear. Temporal arrivals had become common enough that people barely blinked. I scanned the crowd, looking for anything out of place. Then I saw him. Me. Not the 2024 me who'd been murdered, but another me, from what looked like 2019. He was at the bar, watching the crowd with the same expression I probably had. "This is getting complicated," Morales said. "Tell me about it." I approached my other self carefully. Temporal encounters with yourself were tricky. Too much interaction could cause a paradox. Too little and you might miss crucial information. "Let me guess," 2019 me said without turning around. "You're here about the murder. You know about it?" "I've been tracking the killer for 3 years. Well, 3 years from my perspective. They've been using the temporal instability to commit perfect crimes. Kill someone in the past, they never exist in the future. Kill them in the future. Dump the body in the past. No one can solve it." "Who are they?" 2019. Me turned to face me, and I saw the exhaustion in my eyes. "They call themselves the Temporal Correction Agency. They claim they're fixing anomalies, preventing paradoxes. But really, they're just temporal supremacists. They believe only certain timelines should exist. And they want to kill me because? Because you're the anomaly. You exist in too many timelines simultaneously. The detective, the killer, the architect. You're living proof that multiple timelines can coexist. They think killing you will restore temporal linearity to Miami Beach." Before I could respond, the lights went out, not just in the Delano, but across all of Miami Beach, across all timelines simultaneously. In the darkness, I heard a sound like reality tearing, and when emergency lighting kicked in, the party was gone. We were in an empty Delano, but it was all Delanos, every era at once, the walls shifting between different renovations, the furniture phasing in and out of existence. A figure stood at the center of the chaos, wearing what looked like a hazmat suit designed by someone from the future, or the past, or both. The suit prevented me from seeing their face, but I could hear their voice, artificially modulated to exist in all timelines at once. Detective Vega, they said. Or should I say, Detectives Vega. You're all here, aren't you? Every version of you that exists in this temporal mess of a city. They were right. I could see them now. Dozens of versions of me from different years, different timelines, all drawn to this moment. The original 1985 detective who'd never heard of cocaine blades. The 2024 version who was supposed to be dead. The architect from the timeline that never quite happened. All of us. All me. You're the cancer, the figure continued. You're why the timeline won't heal. As long as you exist in multiple iterations, Miami Beach will remain unstable. Miami Beach was always unstable, I said, and all my versions said it at once, our voices creating a chorus. That's what makes it Miami Beach. Then you've chosen extinction. The figure raised something that looked like a weapon, but felt like concentrated time itself. When they fired, it didn't shoot bullets, but temporal energy, designed to erase someone from all timelines simultaneously. But here's the thing about existing in multiple timelines. You can dodge in dimensions that don't normally exist. All versions of me moved at once, but not in the same direction. We scattered through time like light through a prism, each taking a different path through the years. The temporal energy hit where we'd been standing, creating a hole in reality that immediately began pulling everything toward it. "You've doomed the city," the figure shouted. "Without a target, the temporal eraser will consume everything." They were right. The hole was growing, eating through timelines like acid through paper. The Delano was disappearing, not just destroyed, but never having existed. The same thing would happen to all of Miami Beach if we didn't stop it. Unless, 2019 me said, we give it a target. The killer, I realized. They exist in all timelines too, if they can use the weapon. Working together, all versions of me surrounded the figure. They tried to escape through time, but we were everywhere. Past, present, future. Every door they opened, one of me was already there. Every timeline they jumped to, I was waiting. "This is impossible," they said, their modulated voice cracking. "Welcome to Miami Beach," all of me said at once. "Where impossible is just another word for Tuesday." The figure's suit started malfunctioning, unable to maintain stability with so many paradoxes surrounding it. It flickered, revealing the person inside for just a moment. It was another me. Of course it was. A version from a timeline where I'd decided the temporal chaos needed to be fixed, where I'd become the very thing I was now fighting. "You're me," I said. "I'm what you'll become," they replied. "When you realize the cost of keeping the timelines open, the deaths, the paradoxes, the slow dissolution of reality itself, I'm trying to save the city. By destroying what makes it unique, by returning it to sanity." The temporal hole was getting bigger, pulling both of us toward it. The other versions of me were being drawn in too, the gravity of non-existence too strong to resist. In moments, every version of Rico Vega would be erased from every timeline. Unless... Together, I said to the temporal correction version of myself. We go in together, all of us. Every version of Rico Vega that has ever existed or ever will exist. We all go into the hole. That's suicide, worse than suicide. That's complete erasure from all of existence. Or, 2019 me said, understanding dawning on his face. It's the ultimate temporal stability. If every version of us is erased simultaneously, there's no paradox. The timeline doesn't have to choose which version is real because none of them are. And Miami Beach continues as it is, temporal, chaotic, impossible. But without us as the anomaly at its center, it becomes naturally stable in its instability. The temporal correction version of me looked at the growing hole, at the other versions of us being pulled toward it, at the city beginning to dissolve around us. You're insane. I'm from Miami Beach, all of us said at once. Same thing. One by one, we stopped resisting. Each version of me walked into the temporal hole voluntarily. The 1985 detective, the 2024 victim, the architect, the killer, the investigator. Even the temporal correction version, finally understanding that sometimes the only way to save something is to let it go. I was the last one standing at the edge of non-existence. Morales was there, trying to hold me back, but I could feel the pull not just of the whole, but of inevitability. The city needs someone who understands the timelines, she said. It needs you. No, I said. It needs to not need me. As long as I exist as the central anomaly, there will always be someone trying to fix things, to correct things. Miami Beach has to find its own balance. What about the temporal crimes? Who will investigate them? You will. You've learned everything I know. And you're not an anomaly. You exist in one timeline, just one that happens to intersect with all the others. I looked back at Miami Beach one last time. The city was beautiful in its chaos. Art Deco buildings next to glass towers, 1980s Ferraris parked next to Tesla Cybertrucks, beaches that were simultaneously pristine and developed. It was every version of itself at once, and that was exactly what it should be. Take care of the city, I told Morales. And remember, in Miami Beach, impossible just means you haven't partied hard enough to see it yet. I stepped into the hole. But here's the thing about being erased from existence in a city where time isn't linear. You don't quite disappear. You become something else. A legend. A ghost story. A warning. I exist now in the spaces between seconds, in the shadows cast by neon lights, in the reflection of mirrors in Art Deco hotels. I'm not Rico Vega anymore. That person was erased from all timelines. But I'm still here, watching, sometimes helping when temporal crimes get too complex. Morales runs the Temporal Crimes Division now. She's good at it. Better than I was because she doesn't have the baggage of existing in multiple timelines. The city has stabilized in its instability, finding a natural rhythm to its temporal chaos. The beach bodies case is taught at the FBI Academy now, in a special course on temporal investigation. They use my notes, my recordings, though they're not sure if I ever really existed or if I'm just another Miami Beach legend, like the cocaine cowboys or the Versace mansion ghosts. But late at night, when the neon reflects off the water just right, when the past and present blur together in that special Miami Beach way, you might see me. A figure in a suit that could be from any era, investigating crimes that happened yesterday and tomorrow and 30 years ago all at once. Because in Miami Beach, even being erased from existence doesn't mean you're gone. It just means you've become part of the city's permanent temporal instability. And honestly, that's the most Miami thing that could have happened. End recording, file corrupted, timeline uncertain.